I live with my girlfriend as expats in a pretty foreign-friendly Asian country. Most of the time we get by just fine despite only knowing a little bit of the language, because most people we interact with on a day-to-day basis speak fluent English. We started out in a tiny apartment, which we quickly outgrew, and we found a gorgeous condo with nice amenities and decided to move in. This condo is owned and managed by a local owner, rather than by an association or a company. The building is a little bit older, which means that instead of keycard access to our door, it came with a traditional key lock and sliding bar latch, which is nice because it's a bit more durable than a chain. Of note, our original building also had keycard access to our floor, meaning that we could only ever access our own floor. Even the emergency exit stairwells didn't allow entry to floors other than our own. This new place did not include this measure, and I routinely enjoyed a walk up the 15 flights of stairs to the room as a bit of a warm-up before going swimming. The quaint feeling of all this changed about 2 months after we moved in. We were both starting new jobs, and dragged our feet on some of the final touches of moving into a place, and that's the last time we'll ever do that. My girlfriend nudged me awake at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up extra groggy and unsure of my surroundings, but I snapped to full attention when she whispered with wide eyes, "Someone is trying to open the door." Now, the condo is 100 square meters, and the main door and the bedroom were at opposite ends. The bedroom itself has a rather sturdy door that was closed, and the aircon runs at night, so this must have been some commotion for her to wake up. I sprung out of bed and made it to the door in seconds. I also sleep buck naked, so I awkwardly tried to put on a pair of shorts while I peered through the peephole. There was some guy outside our door, studying very intently at our lock. He was about my height, though probably about 15 kilo heavier, and he was not a foreigner like us. "Wrong room!" I had to yell, because the door was very thick. There was a pause and then a thudding sound, and then a smaller talk sound as he was knocking. From experience, I know that it's hard to hear through the damn door, and if English was not his first language, then understanding me through the door was going to be a real challenge anyway. Looking through the peephole as he kept up his steady knocking, I noticed he swayed back and forth slightly, so I figured maybe he'd had a couple of drinks and had gotten the wrong room. I turned to my girlfriend and told her so, and that I was going to open just the key lock but not the bar latch, and tell him that he had the wrong room. She didn't love the idea, but what was a good alternative? I took a deep breath and undid the key lock. My hand shook as I turned the handle, and one hand braced against the door while the other opened it slightly. He must have been leaning in close, because I saw his face right at the opening, and I could smell beer on his breath. "You've got the wrong," was what I got out before he pushed against the door as hard as he could. The bar latch held, but it was enough that my girlfriend threw herself against the door, and with our combined force we shut it again. "No!" I yelled. "Go away! It's the wrong room!" Then he muttered something that sent chills through me. The door muddled the noise, and having just woken up played tricks on my ears. The language barrier filled in the gaps, but I could swear I heard him laugh a little and say, "Stupid boy." I froze. My girlfriend turned the key lock as he slammed his body into the door once, twice, 3 times. I lost count. Every time I pressed against it harder, but I could still swear the 4 screws that held the bar latch in place wiggled slightly. Expats make jokes here about some of the shoddy construction, but this was the first time I had really considered it a major concern. The thuds returned, and looking through the peephole I could see that he was punching at the door. His stoic face looked patient and annoyed as he swung his arm back over and over. Each time it hit, my girlfriend and I could feel the vibration through our entire bodies. This felt like a nightmare, like I was still asleep. Was this real? Was this guy actually trying to get into our condo? Was I being generous thinking that he just had the wrong room? He saw me, a white guy inside, and he should have caught a glimpse of our kitchen area. Even drunk, he should know that this wasn't his condo. But what if he wasn't lost? What if he knew exactly what he was doing? What if he came in off the street with someone else and bided his time, and waited? Tested doors at 3 a.m. until someone was stupid enough to crack one open. After what felt like an eternity, the pounding stopped and I looked through the peephole. He wasn't there any longer. I listened closely, and I could hear the long ding of the elevator down the hall. He might be leaving. My girlfriend had both our phones, texting the condo owner on hers and shoving mine at me. She was calling the owner, but at 3 a.m. there was no answer. Frantic texts of, "Someone is trying to break in," spammed the other end, where no one was picking up. She messaged friends of ours who live in the next building over, but we both knew it would be hours before anyone responded to us. This is where I kick myself. We knew the emergency number, but neither of us had taken the time to collect the local police or the building security. This is a mistake I'll never make again, no matter if I'm starting a new job or whatever the excuse. Having a list of fast response numbers is as big a priority as getting the keys to the place. We calmed down a bit and agreed that we were going to be up the rest of the night, but that we'd settle up with the condo owner in the morning and report to the building management. There were security cameras in the hallways, so they'd be able to follow up. Then I heard the elevator ding again. I was shaking as I returned to the peephole and watched as the chunky man returned. He was hanging up a mobile phone and retrieved something from his pocket. A knife? A multi-tool? That's when I said it. He's back. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife within reach and returned to brace against the door. My girlfriend was almost in a full-blown panic as she grabbed the cast iron skillet. That's when I realized for the first time that there was a chance that someone was going to die. The door handle was wiggling as he started to poke at the lock with whatever was in his pocket. If he opened one lock, the only thing between him and us would be the 4 tiny screws on the bar latch. And if he got into this condo, we were going to defend ourselves as best we could. And that's when I realized we were foreigners, and dealing with manslaughter charges in a foreign court system would be an absolute nightmare. Or if we severely injured him and he was able to communicate his story his way to the police, while we struggled with an interpreter. And of course, this was all assuming that we would be the ones to overpower and subdue him. I had no idea who he was on the phone with. What if this guy had friends scouting other rooms in the building? Or what if he was a guest of someone upstairs? Maybe he just told his poker buddies to come down and rough up us helpless foreigners. I measured up my girlfriend with the skillet, and myself with a kitchen knife, and found myself honestly wondering how many drunk, stocky men we could take. All this was running through my head as I called the equivalent of 911 and shouted English into the phone until someone spoke it. My brain wouldn't quiet down enough for me to be polite. I finally got an operator that spoke English, and I explained that someone was trying to break into our condo, that he had left and returned, and gave him the address. He sent a car and I asked for an ETA, but he couldn't give me one. Great. Thanks for that. It felt like forever holding the key latch shut with one hand, knife on the counter nearby, and phone in the other waiting for the emergency team to call back. All while listening to his muttering and pounding on the door, inches from my head. Looking at the woman I loved next to me, terrified, also wondering what was going to happen in the next few minutes. He wandered off again, but my spider sense was in full alert mode. It wasn't until half an hour later when several people bearing police uniforms and building management jumpsuits knocked on the door that I calmed down even a little. I still wasn't sure what to expect. One of the group spoke English while the rest stood back. I explained everything in detail and pointed at the camera in our hallway, saying I wanted whoever it was found. One of the cops pointed at the nearby knife and raised an eyebrow, and I just confidently said, "Yeah, I would have if I needed to." He seemed to smile a bit. After assurances and apologies and promises of follow-up, we received what we should have collected weeks ago. direct phone numbers to our building security room where the cameras are monitored, as well as the local police station and the personal mobile number of our building security director. The sun was coming up and our condo owner called my girlfriend to comprehend what was going on. She promised us that she'd send locksmiths there that day to install another deadbolt as well as a second bar lock, if it helped us feel safe. The follow-up of everything was that the guy was indeed someone who got drunk and mistook the room, and was on the wrong floor. Wouldn't have been an issue if we had keycard access per floor, right? He was apparently known in the building for this. It would have been nice to let us know. His wife had come to collect him more than once, and he would be fined for the cost of installing the extra locks. So while it is a bit comforting to know that he's a random drunk instead of a burglar, I still explained to the building management that I have no desire for an apology from him. I don't care if he feels bad. Police reports here can be messy, and locals can hold severe grudges that I did not want to deal with. I'll only keep from a full police report if I literally never see or hear from him again. And apparently, stupid boy was a mix of foreign language and my ears playing tricks on me, though I'll never truly be 100% sure of that. Okay, so first off, this happened a few months ago. I had just moved into an apartment complex and only had a bed, a TV, a rocking chair, and an Xbox One. I work in a town that's about an hour away, and they didn't have anything available that I could move into. So this big city was the next closest place that was also in my price range. The first few weeks play out the same. I get up, shower, go to work for 10 hours, come home, eat, and watch a little Netflix. On my days off, I travel 3 hours away to see my wife and kids. We aren't divorced or separated. I had to relocate from the town we lived in to start my career in asset protection as an APM, or asset protection manager. One night, as I was going through my evening routine, someone knocks on my door. It was a woman, maybe 5'7", brown hair and skinny. She looked like she was methed out of her skull. Her eyes were barely even open. She asked to talk to someone named Jareth. I told her no one by that name lived here. She said he did. She said she was here last Thursday and that he was here. She wanted to buy drugs from him, and this was the address she was given. I told her once again no one named Jareth lived here and shut the door on her. She started banging on the door, crying about how she needed her fix. I told her to fuck off. After a few moments, I heard someone yell at her to shut up or they were calling the cops. The banging stopped and I never saw her again. I sat back down to continue watching the movie I had on. I started thinking about what the woman had said. She couldn't have been here last Thursday. I was off work last Thursday and Friday with my wife and children. I started to look around more closely. Nothing seemed out of place. I checked all the windows. Nothing was cracked or broken. All the security bars were locked in their places. There were no upper attic spaces or crawl spaces. Nothing. I felt a little more secure and went about my night as usual. My next days off, I made sure everything was locked and nothing was out of place. I went to see my wife as usual. I told her what happened, and she suggested I take the pellet gun. Now I know. What is a pellet gun going to do? Well, in her thinking, it looked like a real gun. In the dark, no one can really tell the difference. Same for at a distance. Plus, it had a CO2 cartridge in it and 10 pellets, so I took it with me. When I got back, I looked around. Nothing was out of place, and nothing was missing. I started to put my stuff up as usual, and turned on my Xbox. This is where I noticed something was off. When it powers on, it's supposed to take you to the home screen. On this screen, you can see the last thing you were on, plus the previous things you've done. When I left it last, the Netflix app should have been the first one on there, but it wasn't. Instead, it was Battlefield 1. The one before that was Mortal Kombat. Someone had been using my Xbox. I once again did a thorough search of the apartment, but I found nothing. It was a couple of days after that the guy across from me approached me while I was getting out of my vehicle. He said that a lot of people were coming by my apartment on certain nights and were making a lot of noise, that it keeps his daughter up and if I could keep it down or just stop doing whatever it was I was doing on those nights. I was confused. I must have shown it because his expression changed. He asked me if I was the one who was having people over at all odd hours of the night. I told him no. I proceeded to tell him about the things that were happening. I told him I'm about 200 miles away on my days off. We both came to the same conclusion, that someone was getting into my apartment when I wasn't there. I made the decision not to go see my family one week, to see if the person using my apartment would show up. Of course, no one came that week, or the week after. It dawned on me at work one day, during a conversation about how shoplifters would try to see what vehicle you drove to know if you were there, that it hit me. Whoever was using my apartment knew what vehicle I drove. With that in mind, I waited till my next days off to set my trap. On said day, I parked my vehicle 3 complexes down and walked back to my house. I unscrewed all my light bulbs and waited in the corner of the living room. I had let my neighbor know what I was doing, in case any trouble occurred. I put my phone to its lowest brightness and had my camera ready, flash and all. I waited for 6 hours, which felt like forever, before it happened. I heard the front doorknob start to jiggle. I got up, phone in one hand and pellet gun in the other. The door opened, and someone entered, shutting it behind them. I heard a click, and then another. They were trying to switch on the lights. Then I saw a light from the doorway. They had their phone out and were making their way into the room I was in. As soon as they entered the doorway, I snapped a picture. The brightness of the flash caught him completely off guard. He was momentarily stunned, cursing at me, trying to make his way back to the front door. I yelled at him to get the fuck out and never return. He had reached into his pocket, dropping something as he pulled out a small combat knife. I immediately raised the pellet gun and cocked the hammer. That shut him up completely. He dropped the knife and opened the door and ran out. My neighbor, who had heard me yelling, was waiting outside of his place as the man ran out. He saw me run out of my apartment, gun and all, and asked if I had shot him. I told him no and that it was a pellet gun, but the man didn't know. I went back to the door and retrieved the pocket knife and what he had dropped. It was a key. A key to my door. I don't know how he got it, but he had it. I showed the picture to my neighbor. He thought he recognized him, but wasn't sure. I stayed up late that night, calling my wife and telling her what happened. The next day, I went over to the complex office and told them what happened. I brought up the fact that he had a key to my door and wanted to know why he did. They weren't sure, but then I showed them a picture of the man. They knew right then how he had a key. Turns out the person who was going into my apartment complex was a maintenance worker. He had been one of the ones renovating my apartment before I moved in. They're given keys, and he must have had a copy made of one. Then for nights at a time, he would use it to do whatever it was he did. I must have put a hamper in his nightly business when I moved in. That is, until he figured out my routine. The man was, of course, fired from his job and prohibited from entering the grounds ever again. I was given 3 months free rent. I never pressed charges and let it go. I have a real gun now, just in case. My neighbor and I struck up a friendship, and we now watch each other's places for each other when we're out of town. Hopefully this never happens again to anyone else. And yes, I had the locks changed immediately, in case you were wondering. Hello everyone. Since many of you seem to enjoy my previous story from my childhood, I thought I would share with you something that happened to me about 4 years ago now, that still sits heavy on my conscience. I'm happy to say that most people in this country go their entire lives without encountering some of the monsters that exist in this otherwise beautiful place. Unfortunately, I have not been so fortunate. Before I start, I would like to bore you with some backstory. I've been working as an IT systems administrator for a few years now, and have met many people who I occasionally moonlight as a repairwoman for, and yes, I do pay tax. Over the years, friends have told friends, and I occasionally get messages and phone calls from strangers, asking for basic computer repairs for cheaper than they otherwise would find locally. For years now, I've been overly cautious of people, places and objects that just don't feel right. I've learned to always trust my gut instinct, and to err on the side of caution. This story, however, is the one and only time that I ignored that instinct. Around 4 years ago, I was contacted over text message by a local man. He was direct and straight to the point. The conversation was pretty basic. He asked me if I could look at his computer, as he had heard about me from a friend. I said yes, and he explained the issue that he was having. The PC had suddenly stopped booting. Occasionally he could manage to get it running, but it would operate incredibly slowly and crash quickly. I told the man that I would need to inspect the PC myself. However, it sounded like a case of a hard drive failure. I asked the unknown man to call me to discuss an option, and where he could bring the PC for me to look at it. His response was, "No phone calls. Where can I drop it off and when? I need the things off it as soon as possible." This seemed sketchy to me at first. Most people like to talk over the phone about the issues they're having, and try to sort them out remotely. At the very least, they like to know how much it's going to cost. I eventually brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just well off, and was looking for a fast turnaround which he knows only a hobbyist would be able to achieve in this area. I discussed a time where he could drop off the PC at my work, and asked what time he would like to drop the PC off. He did not reply. The next morning, at the door of my work, there was a PC on the ground, with a post-it note crudely marked with my name in black felt-tip marker. My boss was not super impressed, as our business has quite strict security, and members of the public are not usually allowed onto the premises after hours. I was ultimately very confused, however. I never got a reply from this man, and as far as I knew, he had done a runner. But now I'm convinced this guy has some sort of social anxiety. A refusal to talk on the phone and deliberately dropped the PC off without a word of warning before our business. Not a client-based business. This is an office block. Even opened its doors to its workers. Again, alarm bells are kind of ringing at this stage. However, there was no reason for me to really worry. It's not as if he seemed on edge or dangerous. Not that I could really tell in the few text messages we had sent to each other. I proceeded as planned. Ran diagnostic tools, confirmed it was a dead drive, removed the drive and replaced it with a repurposed one, reinstalled the OS and proceeded to start the recovery process. For those of you not informed of the process, here's the basic rundown. Pull the old hard drive, plug it into a working PC either directly or with a dock, create a virtual clone of the drive, and then perform the recovery using specialized software on the clone, not the actual hard drive, as it may fail during the process. I did this with pretty good results, and managed to recover pretty much everything. I copied all his files over to his new drive, reinstalled the applications I could see he had, and sent the computer on its merry way. Later that day, I sent the man a message, stating that his computer was fixed and he could come pick it up sometime during business hours. He responded a few hours later, saying that he was not going to be available until after work. Okay, I thought. That's fair enough. He probably works too. At first, the man asked if he could meet me at my house after work the following day, which by this stage was definitely too weird. I declined, obviously, and insisted on meeting him at the local post office at around 6 p.m. By this stage, I was kind of getting some pretty bad heebie-jeebies. I decided to have a friend come with me just in case things got weird. I have a friend at work who was happy to come with. We arrive at the post office a little early and sit on the small park bench out front. About 15 minutes pass and the guy finally arrives. By this stage, it's getting very dark. Thinking back now, I'm pretty sure he delayed it as much as he could. The man walks up to us slowly, in a kind of predatory way, creeping forward as to make as little noise as possible, even though we knew he was there. His gray jeans stained with what looked like white paint, wearing a dark hoodie covering his head. All we can see of his face is the protruding, long, gray, tattered beard. The man stands in front of us while I introduce myself and my friend. The man does not react at all. Instead, seemingly looking me up and down for what felt like minutes. I could smell his breath from where I was standing, and his silence was only broken by the sound of his nose hairs whistling as he breathed. I eventually try and speak to him about his PC, stating that it was in fact a dead hard drive. However, before I could finish speaking, he interrupts me mid-sentence with a raspy voice, the kind of voice that makes you feel a tingle at the back of your throat. "Is that the computer?" I responded, "Yes." "Did you get everything back?" The man quickly responded, in more of a statement rather than a question. "Yes, I told you in the text message." In a quick and angry voice, he then asked me, "Did you go through any of it?" "Of course not." "Are you sure?" At this point I was getting really weirded out, and my friend could tell I felt threatened. I don't deal well with older men, and he knew it. He swiftly responded with, "Look man, the computer's fixed and you have your data back. Do you want it or not?" I looked at my friend and then back at the man. He looked me up and down one last time, thrusted some notes in my hand, quickly grabbed the PC, and silently walked away to the car. We got back in the car, and I soon realized the man had paid me $400 just for a simple repair. We never discussed the price, as that usually happens early in the discussion, or as they return their computer, but usually this would only cost around $150. I was shocked and very happy. My friend was not so much. Something was very off about that guy, and now I'm even more convinced. Did you notice how intent he was on you not going through his data? I agreed. Something weird was going on. Although I'm not supposed to, and doing so was kind of a breach of privacy, my itch to know what he was so paranoid about was strong. The next day at work, having been bugged by my friend, I finally decided to take a look at the contents of the clone drive. I noticed pretty quickly that it was quite large. Around 250 gigabytes for what was essentially a Windows install and some basic applications, photos, and a few downloads. It can be tricky to find what's taking up so much space sometimes, but using a tool like Space Sniffer can really help. I booted the program up, and quickly found a zip file hidden in his Windows folder, under an extremely long tree of other folders. Inside all of these were other empty folders. Some had empty documents in them, others were just completely empty. I jumped straight to the zip file and opened it. Luckily, it was not password protected. What I found inside makes me feel sick, even more so given what I've been through in my life. Thousands upon thousands of images and videos of children, some suggestive, others more. I opened 3 or 4 photos and immediately felt lightheaded and sick. I quickly closed the zip folder, shocked. Oddly enough, I didn't settle in until sometime later what I had found. All I was thinking about before that was what would happen if a colleague saw those images in the building. Little did it occur to me what kind of threat this man was, and what now lay upon my desk. I told my friend, who told me to call the police immediately. I did, and was asked to not touch the images further, and to come into the station to make a report with my friend. They later confiscated the drive I had copied the clone to, and I never got it back. I was told by police a week or so later that the phone number the man had used to send me text messages was a web-based application, and the phone number was fake. However, they had identified the man thanks to the metadata stored on the hard drive clone, and that the man probably did not realize a copy was made of his drive in the process of recovery. They also told me the man was being looked for. However, his last known residency was in a different state. The police believed he was staying somewhere without a lease, with a friend, or simply squatting, and had since skipped town. It's been about 4 years now, and I've heard nothing new. I'm still paranoid he's going to come to my office building again or follow me home. I've surrounded my house with self-defense items just in case, and my home feels safe. However, work, not so much. Like I said earlier, most people go through life without ever seeing the scum of society. I've experienced it myself 3 times now, and I'm done. Never, ever again. I got asked in a thread to post my story, so here you go. This took place 2 summers ago in the hometown of the Cowboys. Now I'm aware of human trafficking in this city. I had a coworker pulled out of work and put in a safe house by the FBI because she finally decided to rat on her family. However, I never thought they randomly snatched people. In all the stories, they used drugs or coercion. So 2 summers ago, I'm cycling to a smoke shop. It's kind of out of my way and a not great neighborhood, but I'm fairly confident in its daylight. I ride all over the city and I know the store. I was 24, short and had pink hair, but I always considered myself too intimidating to kidnap. I forget sometimes that even if I'm a veteran, I'm also a short white girl. I pull up to a crosswalk, and I'm waiting for a light when 2 Hispanic guys start catcalling me from a windowless white van. No identification and no stickers. Even the way they yelled at me was weird. It wasn't the typical nice tits or her let me fuck you locker room bullshit. They would talk to each other and then yell through a cracked window about how we're gonna get you and you're next. It felt off, like they were excited, but I just flipped them both off and rode away. End of the story, right? Over a mile later, I'm right around the block from my destination. To set it up, there was a massive empty lot. Really more like 2 lots almost, on my right. That was the side I was riding down. To my left, there was a back fence of a very, very old and probably abandoned house. It was like that all around. Mostly drifters or old people in poverty. A few trap houses. The point is, there was no one else visible, and even if they had seen this, they wouldn't have said anything for their own safety. I'm pedaling along when the album ends, and I think, I'm almost there. I'm not gonna stop and fumble with my phone. This saved my life. As I'm thinking this, a white van pulls up on my left and stays right inside my peripheral. They rev the engine a few times and try to spook me, but something told me not to move. Don't let them know you know. So I acted like my music was playing and pedaled a little bit faster. Up ahead of me was a brick wall on my left, and a tall tree over it before a quick alley entrance. Suddenly, they punch the gas and pull up in front of me, stopping right next to the brick wall. They were trying to corner or funnel me, putting me in a position where I had to ride between their door and the wall. This all happened in a span of maybe 7 seconds. I honestly didn't feel panic. I didn't actively register any fear or sweat or anything. It was like someone much calmer took over my body. I remember instantly crossing the street without even thinking about the movements or why. As I pedaled up their other side, I realized this was the van from before, and now it has a window repair magnet on the side. It's too small to get a good look and has absolutely no contact info, just a generic name. I kept rubbernecking and see there was no one in the front, but there were movements behind the seats. The guys were in the back by the door. They had planned to literally drag me off my bike, off the street, and God knows do what to me. Once I was past, they scrambled into the front seat and pulled out so hard they burnt rubber. I got to the store safe, but I still hate myself for not taking the plate number. Not that it would do any good. They'd probably switch them out later anyway. I knew I had almost been kidnapped and killed, or worse. But it wasn't until I told the story to someone from Mexico that I found out it was Traffickers. They said it sounded sadly familiar and happens all the time. I have no family and my roommates are just roommates. I would have been gone for 3 to 7 days before anyone decided something was wrong, and even then they would have just known I left on my bike and vanished. I would have been across the border or dead before anyone even knew I was gone. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I have a little bit of an update here for you guys. I've recently started streaming a little bit on Twitch. I don't know if you guys are interested in just hanging out and seeing a bit of gameplay of maybe Monster Hunter or some games like that, maybe a few horror games, but I'll leave a link to my Twitch in the description of the video below. As always, if you guys like the video, please leave a comment or perhaps like or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you'd like to message me or you'd like to send in a story for me to read or you have a suggestion for a story I should read, the links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below as well. This includes my Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and now, of course, my Twitch account. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. But please, guys, be patient, because I do get a lot of messages, so if I don't respond to you right away within like a week or two, just be a little patient. I'll get to it as soon as I can. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the description of the email or message what the name of the story is, what the category of the story is, and how you would like to be credited in the video that the story appears in. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, links to the music and the order in which the music appears will always be in the description below the video, so you can go ahead and check that out there. Last but not least, if you guys do enjoy my content, please take a look at my Patreon, and if you feel so inclined, maybe donate like $1 or something. Every little bit helps. It'll never be necessary, but of course, it's always an option if you guys would like to support the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.